All right, today we're diving into something that sounds like it's pulled straight from a sci-fi movie, but it's completely real. I want you to imagine using the power of a controlled underwater explosion to make your food safer, more tender, and last way longer. It's a pretty wild idea, so let's get right into how it all works. You know, for basically all of human history, we've been stuck with this big trade-off when it comes to food. We can make it safe using things like heat and chemicals, but that usually messes up the texture, the flavor, all the good stuff. Or we can have it fresh, but then you're dealing with a shorter shelf life and a higher risk. It's always felt like a choice between one or the other. But what if it didn't have to be? So the solution? Well, it's a total paradox. It involves taking one of the most destructive forces imaginable, a shockwave, and somehow using it with the precision of a surgeon. By setting off a small, controlled charge underwater, we can do something pretty incredible. Preserve food without heat, without adding chemicals, and without ruining what makes it great in the first place. To really get why this is such a game changer, we first need to appreciate the problem itself. The source material calls it the preservation paradox, that constant fight between making our food safe and keeping it fresh.
Okay, so think about it like this. On one hand, you have the traditional methods, kind of the brute force approach. We're talking about boiling, canning, adding salts and nitrates, all that stuff. And yeah, it works, but it almost always comes at the cost of quality. But this new method, it's a completely different philosophy. It uses pure physics, just energy, instead of adding stuff to our food. This is how you get that clean label product that's still perfectly fresh.
So how in the world does this shockwave solution actually work? Let's break down the technology itself. The official name is Shockwave Food Processing, though you might also hear it called the Hydrodynamic process. The core idea is actually pretty simple. You create a massive pressure wave that travels faster than the speed of sound. And this single wave does everything, from tenderizing a tough cut of steak to killing bacteria, all without even raising the temperature. And this is not some clumsy, blunt force. I love this quote from the source material. It's much better to think of it like millions of microscopic scalpels made of pure kinetic energy that are precisely changing the food's structure on a cellular level. It's a completely physical process, not chemical or thermal at all. Now, this all sounds pretty amazing, but I know what you're thinking. How can a force powerful enough to be an explosion not just obliterate, say, a piece of meat? Well, the physics behind it is truly fascinating. The real secret here is a physics principle, and I know it sounds super complicated. Acoustic impedance matching. But trust me, the idea is actually very simple. Think about it. Most food is somewhere between 70 to 90% water. So when you put that food into a tank of water, their densities are almost identical. They're basically a perfect match. And that is the key insight that makes this whole thing possible. Because the densities match, the shockwave doesn't just slam into the food like a hammer hitting a wall. Instead, it flows right through it with almost no resistance, carrying all that energy deep inside the product itself.
And the amount of energy we're talking about here is just staggering. We're talking pressures of up to 100,000 psi, and it's all applied and then gone in just a few microseconds. It's this enormous, instantaneous pulse that does all the work on a molecular level. The source material uses another great analogy. The shockwave acts like a molecular hammer. It's powerful enough to shatter tiny, rigid things like a bacterial cell wall or tough protein fibers, but it's just too fast and uniform to tear apart the bigger structure of the food. It's incredibly precise.
Okay, so that's the physics. But what does this molecular hammer actually do to our food? Let's look at the real-world results of this clean transformation. So one of the most popular uses for this right now is tenderizing meat. As that wave passes through a piece of meat, the immense pressure physically breaks apart the tough protein structures, the stuff that makes a cheap cut of beef so chewy. And the result? You get instant tenderness without having to wait weeks for it to age or poking it with needles.
But it's not just about tenderness. It also works as a powerful sanitizer in a process they call cold pasteurization. For a tiny little bacterium, that shockwave is basically the end of the world. The pressure difference literally rips its cell wall apart, its insides leak out, and its internal structures just collapse. It's a purely mechanical kill, no heat required.
And look, the results are immediate, and you can measure them. Studies show that a single shockwave treatment can instantly make meat anywhere from 20 to 50% more tender. That is a massive jump in quality that happens in literally a fraction of a second.
The science is solid and the results are obviously impressive. But what does this actually look like in practice? I mean, how do you put a controlled explosion onto a factory floor? And what does the future of this tech really hold?
Well, the current process is surprisingly straightforward when you get down to it. You take food that's been vacuum sealed, you hang it in a huge, thick-walled steel tank full of water, and then you detonate a small, very precise charge right in the middle. The water transmits the energy, the tank contains the force, and the food inside is transformed.
But, technology never stands still. The original Hydrodynamic method relies on actual chemical explosives, which means you can only process food in batches. But the next generation of this tech, called EHD, uses a high-voltage electrical arc instead of an explosive. And this is a huge deal, because it opens the door to continuous flow systems. Imagine a conveyor belt just passing right through a shockwave chamber. But it's not all smooth sailing. There are a couple of pretty big hurdles to get over. First up is just consumer perception. I mean, how do you market explosive-treated food? And second, there's the challenge of scalability. The massive engineering task of moving this from a batch process to a continuous system that can keep up with modern factories. But the reasons to push past those hurdles are really compelling. This process uses way less energy than heating and cooling huge vats of food, which is great for the environment. It extends shelf life, which cuts down on food waste, and it perfectly meets that growing consumer demand for clean label foods with fewer chemical additives. A quote from the source material really just captures the whole spirit of this shift. We are moving from changing food with chemicals to changing it with precision energy. This isn't just some new trick. It's a fundamental change in how we think about food science. So, by harnessing one of nature's most powerful forces, we might just be able to finally solve that preservation paradox, creating food that is both perfectly safe and perfectly fresh. The science is proven, the technology is here. The only question left is, are we ready for it?